one black lady, angry black lady to another, Imani, my lord. The Supreme Court right now is giving me all sorts of agita and angst. Let's talk about the case that they are hearing, Louisiana v. Calais. What do we need to know about how this effort to destroy our voting rights is? Oh,
it's
Jesus.
so bad. It's like,
no.
It's so, honestly, Lurie, I was almost in tears yesterday because I really had put off reading a lot of the briefs and like figuring it out because like this administration is a shit show and I just wanted to maintain my peace. I almost was in tears yesterday thinking about what this court is about to do to the Voting Rights Act and in turn, black voters in red states. So Louisiana versus Calais, in short, is a sequel to two cases. One is called Robinson v. Ardoin, and the other one is called Allen v. Milligan. Allen v. Milligan is a case from 2023 where, surprising to everyone, John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh voted with the liberals to preserve Section 2. Right? The issue in the Allen v. Milligan case was whether or not Alabama's redistricting map was racist and denied black people the ability to be representative in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay. So that was Louisiana. That was 2023. Section 2 has to deal with voter dilution, racial dilution of voting. So, for example, in Alabama, what they had done is taken the black belt and then cracked it into separate districts. So, like, half the black folks in the black belt were shoved into a majority white district on one side, and the other half was shoved into a majority white district on the other side. The Supreme Court was like, yo, that's illegal vote dilution under Section 2. And we were all like, oh my God, John Roberts had an opportunity to further gut the Voting Rights Act, and he didn't take it. Shocking.
Right. Shocker.
In comes Louisiana. Louisiana basically did the same thing. They had one majority black district, right? Even though a third of the state's population is black. In Alabama, they also had one majority black district, even though about 27% of the voters in Alabama are black. So in Louisiana, in this case, Robinson v. Ardoin, which I'm saying Ardoin, it's Ardoin, I suppose it's French. But in that case, there was a federal court that said that Louisiana's single majority black district, their whole map was racist, and ordered that a new map with a two majority black district be drawn. So Louisiana drew a two majority black district. And then some white voters came along and said that taking race into account in order to draw racially fair maps, the very fact that you have to look at race in order to draw a racially fair map is in and of itself racist and a violation of the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment. And
wait,
when
you
I
mean the amendments that were created to protect black people from the racist vagrancies and aggressions of the white enslaved class?
Yes. So, this is, I can't even tell you how crazy making this is, because since you remember the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard case, right? That was the case that killed affirmative action, and where the court was basically like, well, we have the Constitution is supposed to be colorblind. It's supposed to be race neutral. And if you have any race conscious remedies, whether it be for diversity or otherwise, that is unconstitutional. That violates the 14th Amendment. That is anti-white discrimination. Yes. So now they're taking that theory, that jurisprudence, and dragging it over to the voting rights context and saying that considering race to draw a racially fair map, which would then mean that Louisiana now has two majority black districts instead of one.
In a state where black people make up a solid third of the population.
A solid third. They said that it was an illegal racial gerrymander to take race into account and draw that second majority black district. Now, why did the Supreme Court take this case? Because in that case from Alabama, Allen versus Milligan, it's the same fucking case. I'm sorry, I know your listeners don't really like profanity. I get that on Blue Sky. Like, you're so profane.
No, we're fine with that, with the N-word. They gonna have to deal with the profanity. But like, there are some things cussable.
No N-word, F-word is fine.
Yeah, you can't. I'm sorry, I said F-word. You can't say the N-word. You can definitely say, you can definitely say fuck, because fuck this shit, fuck this case, fuck this court, but you just couldn't say the N-word, you know.
Right, and we're not among friends, right? Right. So in plain English, the court is asking whether fixing a racial gerrymander is in and of itself unconstitutional because it considers race. And they are saying that they're going to say yes, because now we are living in a world where the 14th and 15th Amendments, these Reconstruction Amendments, which if you listen to my podcast, I routinely call black ass amendments, that these Reconstruction Amendments were actually intended to be race neutral, right? And were actually intended to make the Constitution, which had never been colorblind in history, to suddenly be fucking colorblind. I am losing my mind.
Like, be colorblind on matters concerning the enslaved class, wherein race was used to determine who could be a slave and who could not. But don't you dare use race to fix the problems that the whites' use of race created. If you're going to fix a problem that the racism created, you're going to have to do it without the race component.
Which is bananas. And I remember during oral arguments in Allen versus Milligan, when Sam Alito was kind of like stroking his chin and being like, well, we live in a colorblind society, so isn't it racist to consider race to fix the vagaries of racism? Like, what are we doing here, people? And I was just listening to the oral arguments for about 20 minutes before coming on here, and it's already going south, right? John Roberts, who voted with the liberals in Allen versus Milligan, is pretending like he doesn't understand what racially polarized voting is, right? He doesn't understand why black people vote for black people, black Democrats vote for black Democrats, but white Democrats still won't vote for black Democrats. Like, they're pretending not to understand this.
And we just saw in Louisiana, in the New Orleans mayoral race, Gary Chambers is doing the work of Black Jesus and the gods of all the pantheon to try to get people to come out to vote. But we just saw a great example of racially polarized voting in that race, where black voters largely, overwhelmingly came out for one candidate, and white voters overwhelmingly came out for the other. And as Gary Chambers says, he ain't saying all them white voters are racist, but he says that the racists understood who their candidate was. Racially polarized voting is still the norm in far too much of this country, where white voters are able to basically use their numbers to destroy the ability for any other group of people to get the candidates that they want.
Yeah. And here's where it gets worse. So in Shelby v. Holder, John Roberts and the court gutted sections 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act, right? Section 4 and section 5 together said that states with a history of racism when it comes to voting had to ask the DOJ for pre-clearance before they enacted any new election laws, so that the DOJ could come in and make sure that they weren't back on their racist bullshit, right? In Shelby v. Holder, 2013, John Roberts said that, and let me backtrack a little bit. With the pre-clearance formula, Congress has to repeatedly sort of say, yes, we're still doing pre-clearance. Yes, we're still doing pre-clearance. Congress has always said, yes, we're still doing pre-clearance. But John Roberts popped in and said, well, we probably need to take another look at this, because racism as we knew it isn't really around anymore. And so we need to figure out how to take the racism out of voting, right? The way they wanted to take race out of affirmative action, race out of the diversity requirements. We need to get race out of it. There's got to be a temporal limit to how long we are going to consider race in order to remedy racism. And so again, in Calais, just now before I turned it off to come on here, Brett Kavanaugh was talking about, well, shouldn't we have a conversation about the temporal limit? Because, it can't be that we continue to use race in order to fix racism in perpetuity. Bitch, yes, it does. That's exactly what it means. Absolutely, as long as there's racism in this country. And let me tell you about a temporal limit. The Voting Rights Act was passed 50 years ago. We've had 5 decades of Voting Rights Act. We had 88 years of Jim Crow.
Right.
88 years of Jim Crow on top of 250 years of slavery. So we're supposed to say that the temporal limit means we only get 50 years of somewhat voting rights, of some voting rights, on top of 88 years of Jim Crow and 250 fucking years of slavery. What are we fucking doing here? Like, I can't even deal with it. And the idea that the Reconstruction Amendments were not intended to help Black people is ahistorical. And I had to come on the show. I'm sure Justice Jackson is going to be in there doing originalism better than the originalists, because she has repeatedly brought up the fact that at the time in the 1860s, everyone who was drafting these amendments knew that the point of the amendments was to help Black people, newly freed slaves. Right? That's why they're called Reconstruction Amendment. Obviously, Reconstruction failed, because after Reconstruction around 1877, that's when Jim Crow popped up and the KKK started riding around burning crosses on people's lawns and lynching people.
Good catch.
It was a close one.
Don't do it. Good catch. Good
But
catch. Although
just,
that would have been a use of the N-word that was historically appropriate because that's what they
that's
were
true.
screaming when